The first part of this story ended with Harry arriving at the special room for shooters to test his knife-throwing skills on one of the simulators. He already had his weapon in hand and was fully prepared. After 20 seconds, the machine threw several plates upwards. As expected, without any problems, all the targets were hit at once. With only one throw, the accuracy was incredible. For completing the first training session, 100 points were added to Harry's overall rating. The next launch is about to start. This is basically a great opportunity to use this thing to improve your own level. If you train every day, you can achieve good results. It was already evening, and the guy had just now managed to get to the next level, and as a result he got 80 more points, so there was still room to grow. It was just the beginning of this difficult journey. When Harry looked at the time, he realized that he had forgotten that he had an important meeting scheduled for today because of this training. I had to pack as quickly as possible and go to the meeting place called the fishing pier. There was not a soul around, only the waves of the sea washed this small pier. Suddenly a military helicopter flew right to the edge, with a beautiful lady on board. It was the most spectacular appearance. An elastic ladder was dropped for the guy to climb aboard. It turned out to be the same lady who left the note in the badger crystal box. Her name is Mia. She pounced on the guy with a hug and couldn't believe he had come after all. Then she looked at him and realized he wasn't the one the letter was addressed to at all. After realizing this, her heart was broken and tears flowed. Harry tried to tell her that the recipient hadn't seen the letter because it hadn't reached him. He was here to explain everything. He wanted to leave, but the young lady stopped him. She wanted to get to know each other better, because Thomas never just asked for crystals for anyone. The first most important question was whether the guy was strong, and he said yes. Now from that moment he was accepted without any ceremony as a newcomer to the team, and was forced to fly back to the base with everyone else. The whole team immediately introduced themselves and welcomed the new member. They were happy to have him in their ranks. The boy had to pretend that he was very happy about this event and proudly join their ranks. From now on, he would have to perform tasks instead of Thomas. One of the group members, whose name is Jacob, thought the newcomer's name was very familiar. So he immediately decided to open the ranking and saw the guy on 68th place there. In fact, the guys have a difficult task ahead of them. A week ago, several people infiltrated a closed facility to engage in poaching. The nearest units have already been sent there, but they were all poisoned by some unknown toxins. Unfortunately, one of them has already lost his life. Thomas wasn't susceptible to toxins, so Mia wanted to ask him for help. If Harry refused to participate, he would be understood and not forced. The guy wasn't one to back down. He couldn't afford to chill sitting in a helicopter. Such self-confidence aroused the partner's interest, and he decided to offer sparring. Since our hero doesn't like to talk off-topic during a mission, he decided to freeze this sparring enthusiast so that he could think about his behavior. Mia was surprised at what she saw, but even more she was amazed that the effect would last for 2 minutes. She didn't even know it was possible. In order not to create intrigue, Harry said that he had a skill that increased the power of the others. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events, and immediately started asking him what other abilities he had. Jacob remembered an ancient legend about a hero named Elfie, who was a lord of snow and ice, and Harry must be as good as he was. The guy was immediately offered a weapon. He could not go into battle with his bare hands. Then the team went out to do business. According to preliminary data, poachers are somewhere in this area. All participants need to be very attentive and keep in line. Thanks to his heat skill, which works around 1,000 meters, the guy saw a whole pack of wolves. They were all moving in the same direction. Something had clearly attracted them. Mia said that the wolves in this area is a bait for monsters. They are regularly fed. The fact that they are here and the units are destroyed is a very bad sign. In the forest, the smell of meat was so strong that it was not even difficult to find its source, most likely some kind of animal trap. At this point, the team is discussing a plan of action and what they should do next. Since Harry is resistant to the poison, he makes the decision to be the bait to make the poachers give away their location. After hearing this, Mia couldn't close her mouth. How can one already be resistant to poison at such a young age? There was no time to talk, we had to act. There was also an order not to take any of the outsiders prisoner, but to shoot on sight, and the rest of the group would cover from cover. When Harry came to the place, the wolves did not attack him, but just called to him, which means that the enemy is somewhere near. The guy saw a few people on either side, so he first decided to clear the field so the wolves wouldn't interfere with him in the fight. He managed to do it in just a few seconds of time. The poachers then activated the scorpion venom, which in theory should be very poisonous to humans, but not in this case. Harry even managed to complain that the toxin was too weak, and when he figured out his opponents for the second time, he threw his blades at their heads, killing them on the spot. If that's all there is to it, the opponents were really weak. The rest of the team even felt a little ashamed that they didn't get to see the guys who weren't even wearing camouflage clothes. We'll have to forget this situation like a bad dream. Harry reported the danger was completely over. Mia noticed the flying daggers in the guys' hands, which looked like the ones the Bureau of Surveillance was working on. They even had a special number on them. These weapons were not the most popular, and ordinary people didn't use them. Harry destroyed those two people so calmly that Mia couldn't even think of what to say to him. She was in a bit of a stupor. The boys, in turn, were fascinated by Harry's professional knife skills. They wondered how many years of practice it took for him to start throwing so perfectly. Since the guy has talent in this respect, he learned in a short period of time with the help of a simulator that throws plates. This simulator was no longer used in educational institutions because it was too complicated. Most students couldn't even pass the first level. One guy on the team was really down about it, because in his whole life, he hadn't managed to pass a single level. It was time to summarize. The poachers who had taken over the forest had used 3 abilities. The first was wolf pack control, the second was scorpion venom, and the third was super camouflage. Harry was 100% sure about the poison. Because he had the ability to absorb it, it was impossible to be wrong. On behalf of the entire team, Mia expressed her gratitude for the help. Many of the fighters are still in the hospital because the doctors failed to recognize the poison, but now it will be several times easier to treat them. The current treatment is not a panacea, just that Harry saved many lives. It turns out most professionals are not that strong. Not everyone can absorb the power of the crystal, so you can't do without technology. But now what to do next? It was just one small group. It is necessary to catch all the others. They will not be able to escape so easily, so you need to at least try. The best thing to do is to take someone hostage to organize negotiations. Lone units like these guys would be much easier to intimidate than the regular military, for example. The decision was made to just wait them out here. Not far from here, Harry spotted another group of people, probably poachers. These people were not shy at all, and came out into the clearing in the open. The most important of them was called Oliver, and as it turned out, a lot of people here knew him. For some reason, he was in a pretty good mood, and even started hitting on Mia. Jacob said that this seemingly ordinary guy was one of the strongest guys in Germany, and that he had to be very careful, and that there was no information about the others. One of the team members noticed among the group of poachers a previously popular man. According to him, the country invested in this guy quite a lot of resources, but in the end he betrayed her and went the dark road. In his defense, the villain replied that after one refusal, specially trained people deprived him of power and all the resources, but of course about this did not tell anyone. According to him, if it wasn't for outside help, he would never have known what it means to be free and happy, in which case you can get anything you want, not to mention power. Unlike China, where ordinary people can't even touch crystals. Harry decided not to argue, and threw 3 of his blades at 3 different people. Only one survived, the other 2 managed to stop the weapons in flight. Can't get rid of them that easily, seems like something else needs to be used. Oliver appreciated the forging skills in China. The knives are really well made. Too bad their owner has no boundaries and throws them at everyone he can and can't. Harry also informed Oliver that he would have no discussions with the future eternally asleep. Despite this, the villain did not lose his enthusiasm and offered to join him, guaranteeing excellent conditions. To put it another way, he wants to destroy Mia's entire team and just recruit Harry and take him under his wing. Harry asks for his knife back first, which Oliver graciously agrees to do. Apparently he really thinks he can get the guy on his side. At that moment Jacob Mystery began to use his power. He increased all of Harry's abilities by 20%. This effect will last for 10 seconds. In order not to lose that precious time, we had to attack now. Harry threw 3 more blades after that. 2 of the boys lost their lives immediately, but Oliver was not so easy. Despite the fact that he was like an ice cube, he managed to control the situation completely, and once again stopped the blade right in front of him. Then the ice began to slip off of him very quickly. The fact that the attack had been sneak attacked made Oliver very angry, and now he was going to take revenge for the Chinese's not-so-serious act. Harry began to realize what had happened, and he froze in place, a complete emptiness in his eyes. Because of this confusion, the boy misses one strong blow to the chest, after which he flies a very long distance away. The guys caught him, so that he didn't hit his head on something, but nevertheless Harry was already unconscious. The blow was too strong. An attempt was made to heal him, but to do so when a person has no heartbeat and no breathing, to do so in a short time frame is becoming very difficult. Anyway, there was no time to shed tears now. We had to deal with this asshole before he destroyed everyone here. Even though the guy was already cold, he was really ashamed of his team. They just took to burying him right there. That's how you help people, and they would even make an attempt to save the man. At least the guys took the fight from such an unequal opponent and started attacking. It seemed that Oliver had a lot of skills, because for every critical situation, he had an optimal solution. At the moment, he was using the fire giant ability, making it almost impossible to take him down if he didn't have fire resistance. Realizing the criticality of the situation, Mia decides to use her strongest skill, which takes a large amount of energy. It was a devastating sound wave, which operates in the range of 600 meters. Oliver felt it immediately, and even fell to one knee from the strain. This vicious poacher could not so easily lose his life, but if you continue to use the fire skill, his human body will burn. It is necessary to take some action as soon as possible. Suddenly everything around him starts to burn with a strong fire. The temperature in the area has risen significantly. If it continues like this, the guys can simply burn alive. Apparently, luck was on the side of good today. Harry woke up, and thanks to the fact that he was an ice mage, he put out the fire with a flick of his hand. It turned out he was immune even to such dire situations. He just needed to lie still for a while and gradually his heartbeat would return to normal. As the country Oliver lived in was always in favor of freedom and justice, Harry offered him a one-on-one fight. The bandit could not refuse, because if he continued like this fiery ability would destroy him sooner or later. Against all at once he could not stand, but only against Harry there were chances. So he had to agree to this adventure. The presence of the whole team will only get in the way, so they gathered and started to run away from the battlefield, leaving the guy alone with this monster. Harry just has to survive, because on him all the hopes rely. Before the fight started, Oliver said that he appreciated such bravery. Harry just smiled back, because he knew that the person who was going to lose his life today was not him. The boy had been preparing for a long time, and he was going to put almost all of his strength into one decisive blow, which would be impossible to stop. The poacher refused in a large ice dome, inside which was a very low temperature. It began to suppress his fire, until he took a normal human form. Its formula is quite simple. You just need to take into account the temperature of the opponent and the cooling time, so you can change the pressure, and the space that surrounds will turn into a vacuum. The next stage of this skill is to simply begin to devour the human body. Since fire cannot exist in a vacuum, Oliver has lost to the laws of physics. When the poacher realized that this fight was over for him, the only thing he had time to do was to say goodbye to his daughter, and ask her forgiveness for the fact that her father left so early. When the effect is over, Harry should be very weak, usually after such stresses he faints, but this time, thanks to the reinforcement, he managed to stand. In the end, Oliver was left with only one small crystal, which contained incredible power and many abilities. Of course, this is an unusual crystal, because it did not explode like all the others. By the way, they are hidden inside the body. But why is nothing said about it in the textbooks? If Harry takes it for himself, there could most likely be trouble. Despite the immense power of this item, it is politically useless because it is impossible to improve the level of all these skills in the future. Roughly speaking, whoever absorbs this crystal will remain at the same level forever. So the decision was made to just bury it and pretend like it never happened. Maybe there will be something else useful in the poacher's backpacks. After opening the bag of these ill-wishers, the guy found their yellow crystals that were available for absorption. Their main ability is coquetry. Also in the future it can be improved. There was an unlimited amount of these crystals. Now we know why they destroyed some little bears and burned them alive. If such a serious man had come for those crystals, they must be quite valuable. Harry decided not to dwell on such a strange name and absorb all the crystals at once. Perhaps this skill would become useful in the future. Now it would be a little harder for the enemy to resist Harry's charms. The boys noticed that the flames had gone out on the battlefield, so it was time to check the situation. Harry was already sitting on the edge of the cliff, admiring the view after such a hard fight. Mia was insanely happy. She believed with all her soul that the boy would survive. The girl didn't even notice the stone under her feet and tripped over it. The task was completed, so Harry asked to send him to the academy as soon as possible. So the team immediately set off toward the school. Her sister had called and texted many times, and she had to explain herself to her, but unfortunately she couldn't do it right now because the connection wasn't working. Harry has even considered buying a phone that will work in special zones, but before he can buy one, he has to get a permit. But if the guy finally joins this team, he'll be able to get a permit in no time. It's actually worth a shot with that kind of power. The pay is decent, and the satellite phones are free. The office department is located in the city of Tushu. There are only 9 people working there, each of whom is very strong as a full team. They usually work independently on particularly complex tasks that are not able to normal teams. So far, this guy is not particularly interested. He did not want to leave his sister for the sake of work. It seems the academy misunderstood this visit, because the principal took a few more representatives with him. After landing, everyone was very happy to see each other. Mia said that they had picked up a student from this school on the way and decided to let him down. As it turned out, the headmaster didn't even know Harry was a student, but he was quickly informed that he was in a special class, and that he was a student that Charlie had personally recommended for enrollment. The third boy heard this information and thought that Harry had been brought here solely by connections, which made him feel cheated. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and shouted at the entire helipad that Harry was trash who came by connections, and that there was no place for such people in the academy. Since the guy had no idea who was standing in front of him, he decided not to find out, but instead just to go to dinner with his sister as soon as possible. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. This upstart wanted to fight Harry, so he grabbed him by the shoulder. You could say with this action he signed the heaviest punishment, at least in the future for sure. But he decided not to stop there. He picked the guy up and threw his head against the ground. Jacob had to start emergency treatment again, but this time he woke up quickly. Even though his regenerative ability was weakened, it was still useful. Mia told this upstart to apologize immediately for his act. Harry spills his red liquid for this country to do well here, and instead of thanking him, he was thrown over his hip. His uncle apologized in the guy's place and said it was all the academy's fault. Even so, his mouth didn't close and he managed to sass Mia. By the way, the kid got emotional and called the director his uncle, so the question of connections is completely removed. Mia will report today's incident to the head of the military district, and this upstart will get what he deserves. This situation is a huge blow to the academy's reputation. Finally, after all this time, the boy managed to get to his room, where he was met at the door by a cheerful Charlie. Apparently Harry wasn't too eager to see him yet, so he slammed the door back shut immediately. With a very serious face, Charlie opened them back up and said, "You've been out all night, and you're back with a girl, and it's definitely Harry, or not." The guy laughed a little and stormed into the room, saying that he needed to get changed right away, leaving the two of them alone. Since Mia had already brought the student to safety, she could be free to go about her business. On the one hand, that's right, but Charlie doesn't have the authority to tell such an important lady what to do, even within the confines of a school. After some more time, the boys finally sat down at the table. Olivia asked her brother where he had been for so long. One of the girls needed help, so the boy couldn't refuse her. Charlie had been warned about it beforehand, or he would have put Harry on the wanted list. Olivia threw herself into tears, and made it clear that she was against marrying this girl because her brother had to skip class because of her. But not to worry, even if Harry ever got married, there was no way he was going to skip class. If this cheeky girl comes again to distract the guy from classes, he will just get rid of her. Olivia's assigned Charlie to protect her brother from these bad women. But you don't have to worry about that. Anyone who wants to hurt him is already a potential corpse. By the way, it's time for the coach to start training properly, because the student can handle him in 2 seconds. Some boy was sitting on the next table in the dining room, fully documenting Harry and Olivia's actions in his notebook. The biggest question on his mind was why the boy was eating practically nothing. He's a regular member of the student union, gets a scholarship, and there was a theory that he was anorexic. And his sister's appetite has increased, she always has extra chicken and other spicy dishes. When the brother doesn't like spicy food, there's not a piece of chili on his plate. The nerd gave all this information to the other guy through a message on his phone. As soon as Harry and his sister were about to leave, one of the students came up to them and offered to go to a nice new restaurant. The guy immediately flatly refused, but Olivia, when she hears the word food, begins to go crazy. Sometimes it seems that absolutely anyone can ask her out to dinner, and she agrees. To get out of the situation, Harry went to the extreme and accused the boy of peeping on his sister when she was in the girls' locker room. To somehow justify himself in a situation that he had nothing to do with, the student said that he was misunderstood. In fact, he was just looking towards the locker room, because his friends were standing near it. Harry ended up calling him a pervert, took his sister's hand and quickly ran to the exit to separate them. He also promised to take Olivia to the place himself, so she wouldn't go with anyone else. Charlie overheard this rant and asked him to take him to the restaurant. By the way, the upstart who had thrown Harry over his hip had been fined for insult and defamation. As it turned out, he had been encouraging everyone to write complaints to Harry to get him expelled from the school. All in all, it was just great news. When they arrived at the restaurant, the guys had good news and bad news. The first was that in honor of the opening there is a 15% discount on the entire menu, and the second was that there were too many people here. They considered the option of just taking the food with them and going to eat elsewhere. But suddenly, from the other end of the hall, Harry was called by a pretty girl sitting alone at a table for 4. She was the prettiest girl in the academy, but at the same time she had an obnoxious temper. Only she could take a huge table for herself, given the large number of people. It was a good time to order food and stay here to fully experience the atmosphere of this new place. Since this girl was a peculiar girl, everyone looked at her differently. Charlie studied her, Harry looked at her like a punching bag, and Olivia looked at her like a manhunter. Not to make things too tense, her sister decided to meet this goddess and asked her what her name was. Olivia assumed it would be something scary, but it turned out to be a perfectly ordinary name, Lily. Meanwhile, Charlie had already finished his analysis. It turns out that this girl is a strong helper, has a buff of 448% of strength when meeting an enemy. It lasts for 4 minutes. Well, she won't be that cool for long, because when Olivia grows up, she'll be the one and only. Charlie's analysis also showed that Lily was really excited, though she was skillfully hiding it. Since the girl came here in advance, and took the exact number of seats. She probably wants to talk to Harry about something. It turned out to be a completely correct assumption. The thing was that the Academy annually selects students to participate in the competition. In previous times they had gathered one team of 6 people, and this year they needed to gather 2 teams of 4. There were 3 spots available for this year. Lily suggested that Harry try to take part in the event. The boy replied categorically that he wasn't interested. Because it's not good to fight with classmates. Moreover, isn't Lily's phenomenal abilities enough to win this stupid championship? According to her logic, it's best to put together a team with maximum strength to win for sure. The most beautiful girl of the Academy couldn't stand such a reaction from the guys and just left the restaurant. But it was for the best. Now Olivia could eat her portion too. The taste of the dish was rather strange, and apparently only her sister liked it. It was probably the idea of someone higher up than Lily, but who would have thought she would come in person? She wanted to get Harry on her side so that he would sing to her tune, but it couldn't be that way. Olivia had gone overboard with the spices after all, and now the dish was too spicy for her as well. This situation made the guys laugh a little, and Harry decided to give his portion to his sister, so she wouldn't get upset. By the way, in addition to team competitions, there are also individual competitions. Such a format would suit the guy obviously better, but Lily deliberately did not mention it and the award. Suddenly Harry took and started pouring the entire contents of his plate straight into his mouth. From the outside it looked like his tongue wasn't working, in fact it was, but you can't talk about it. The guy asked his companion to stay focused and continue talking about the awards. In brief, the winners of both categories receive prizes. 1st through 3rd place people get the highest category crystals, 4th through 8th the highest category, and the last 2 places, the middle category. Since Olivia was out of the loop, she couldn't understand why her brother was called to the competition for warriors. Harry had been looking for the right moment to tell her everything, and now was the moment. To not delay long, the guy without ceremony said that recently he had become a real warrior. This information shocked the girl. The little girl began to cry, because she was sure that very soon her brother would lose his life. At first, the guys didn't understand how it was connected, but then Olivia admitted that for absorbing only 2 abilities, she had 20 years of life taken away from her, and by that logic, it could be assumed that the brother had spent much more. When Harry found out about it, he didn't hold back and screamed at the whole thing. His sister had wasted a whole 20 years of her life. Late that night the boys came home and Olivia showed her brother what crystals she still had left. Originally, the uncle who looked after her had given the girl a crystal with 3 powers, for which 30 years of life were to be taken away. It was now clear why in the past life, the sister had fought so desperately in the past life. She knew her time was running out. One had to wonder if it was possible to regain the years of life spent absorbing the crystal. As far as Charlie knew, a normal absorption ability would forcibly shorten a life, but Olivia's situation was unheard of. Usually the years do shorten a bit. Unfortunately, there is no technology that can prevent it. Charlie hadn't paid attention to it before, but now he saw that the girl had indeed lost 20 years of her life. Since this feature is hereditary, her brother's situation may be similar. Harry's current life expectancy is 0 at all, but how is that possible? Olivia can no longer absorb crystals under any circumstances. The guy tries to explain everything to his uncle. He has to get it right. If Olivia loses her life, then Harry's whole life will lose meaning. We can't let that happen. The girl was crying and could not understand how she would protect her brother when they grow up. There are so many horrible creatures in the world, it is very difficult for ordinary people to survive in such conditions. All life is collapsing before their eyes. Ordinary people can also be strong. They become stronger through physical activity, win wars through strategy, heal the wounded. These are all their talents. The power of crystals wasn't the only thing that could make a person stronger. The first person who was able to fight back the monsters definitely didn't have such strength. The girl would be able to throw knives just as accurately if she started practicing hard. In addition, she already has as many as 2 abilities, so with persistent training, a lot can be achieved. Harry will hope that from now on his sister will no longer be investigated as a guinea pig, because she is no longer allowed to ingest any crystals. Charlie said that these lab rats don't like to be disturbed in their work, so don't worry. The boy breathed a sigh of relief, something positive for tonight. Then he asked for his sister's smartphone and called Leo, and told him that Olivia could no longer absorb the crystal energy, and asked him to take what was left from her. There's no cure for this disease because it's hereditary. It's treatable. Of course, Leo was angry, because it was Harry who would let his sister become a warrior. The whole curriculum was set up for her. Now who to replace her with? Harry hardly fits those parameters. The boy explained that his abilities are not worse, so he will succeed. He can even prove it. But from now on, all privileges between his sister and Leo are removed. If Harry makes it into the top 10 in the student personality test, they'll believe in him and put him in her place. For the past decade or so, this MMORPG has ranked first among virtual reality game titles in terms of concurrent users. The hero demonstrates his power with his sword, emphasizing his status as the best player of the Abyss. He confidently crushes enemies with his sword, leaving no chance of survival. This master suddenly appeared and quickly eliminates opponents without noticing obstacles. He cleanses the world of evil and keeps control of goodness. Iron, a hero with a sword, easily destroys enemies as if they were paper. His blade is colored with the red liquid of his enemies. With a smile, he will also fight the gods, having won hundreds of battles in 10 years. His weapon is lightning, touching, causing sharp pain. With the Sword of Light, he felt the fire in his fingers where lightning and flame merged, a deadly combination. For 3 years in a row, he held the first place in PvP, unrivaled and unbeatable. As he touched the enemy with his sword, the fire enveloped the enemy who took cover with his shield to avoid the fate of the victim. The poisoned daggers with bright green light testified to his determination and confidence in battle. Combining them, he created a dangerous spearhead. With one tug he caught up to the knight, looked into his eyes, and without saying anything, put his life on the line. The knight saw his last moment as iron, with a deft movement of his hand, swiftly ended him on the battlefield. The golden spear in the hands of the desperate boy was rushing at the enemy, depriving him of his last hopes of survival. Iron pierced him, fresh red liquid pouring over his enemy's face like a stream. It was a brutal massacre, but such is the world and such are men. Iron's enemy was defeated. His body lay in a puddle of red liquid, his heart silenced, his eyes closed forever. This man is a gunsmith by profession. He knows his job. Right now he's unbeatable, although even a champion has his champion. But we'll talk about that later. All players who are waiting for the sequel to this masterpiece received a notice. The sequel is coming soon, the release is near. Very interesting what the future holds for this game, the continuation of Abyss. Maybe logging into old accounts won't work. You'll have to start character development all over again. But even so, the desire to play will not go anywhere. Some of them still wondered whether they should continue or not. As they weighed the pros and cons, a call came in on the phone. It was from his older brother, one of the creators of the Abyss. Sean, but why did he call so late? Is it something urgent? Sean had asked Donnie for a favor. Don was wondering why Sean had invited him to this place. Maybe there was something to talk about. There was nowhere to go, so Shock sat down and took a sip of flavored coffee. The man in question was the creator of Abyss, the CEO of Unisir, responsible for the internal affairs of the company. Donnie was very involved in the information being shown on the tablet he was talking about. Sean asked if he knew of the character, and Donnie confirmed that it was a Dark Knight he had heard of. The Dark Knight is a key character in the plot of Abyss, the guardian of the Red Queen. A mysterious and symbolic character who has become a legend. Remembered in the event in honor of the release of the World of the Abyss. A battle with the Dark Knight where 100 players could test him in a one-on-one battle. Donnie knew about the event, and Sean was planning to add the guy to the list of participants. He was certainly not against it, but feared criticism due to his position. Nevertheless, Sean encourages Doni to become a Dark Knight. This suggestion only caused the guy to laugh. In his opinion, it is the most ridiculous idea. But Sean was serious. He would not stop insisting that Doni become a Dark Knight. All who become knights sooner or later lose their lives in accidents. Sean tried to recover the data and find more of some information, but he only found development information. The Queen said no, their Korean players took it as a taunt. Sean suggested that Doni become a Dark Knight and fight the best player, Mark Tool. Doni was talented enough to overpower him. The two are half-brothers, so they are considered one family. One wanted to think things through and do everything as efficiently as possible to maximize the benefits. But since Doni was very naive and kind, he could easily agree to his brother's requests, whatever they were. Sean's business had taken away all human notions and sympathy for everyone. Sean and Doni weren't close enough to ask for a favor so blatantly. Despite that, Sean offered Doni free access to the Abyss world for life. Doni's reaction was surprised and even a little funny, but then he asked not to be laughed at. The guy was capable of purchasing access on his own, but Sean offered 2 additional bonuses. The first was a special device to enter the Abyss world, allowing him to raise his synchronization threshold to 25%. Doni felt shock and a kind of fantastic surrealism. He couldn't believe what he was hearing from Sean. If indeed it is possible to increase the synchronization threshold to 25%, it would mean an even deeper and more realistic immersion in the game. Usually devices are set to 15%, so 25% is a real temptation. As for the second bonus is the ability to speed up profession changes. Doni paid attention to his history in the gaming world. He spent about 9 months to change his profession. He would also like to choose the same profession in this world. Sean is willing to help him do that so that it can happen much faster. It was the best he could offer without risking himself. On this night, the moon was shining brightly and the houses were lit up. The residents were calm and felt completely safe. Doni could hardly imagine what a 25% synchronization level felt like. All of this inspired him even more. Plus, he would get help changing his profession to weapon master. Without the extra knowledge, the right level and gear that regular players in the Abyss world need to achieve. Basically, given the title and story, it's like a whole new game. Doni is contemplating how to transition to another world if he has to start over. But with Sean's help, it will take a lot less time. Once he became a monster, he could defeat the other rankers. Doni thought about it and decided that there was no reason to refuse. He told himself that he would get the fun and the reward. A notification popped up on his phone. The stranger invited the guy to a meeting. Doni was surprised when he read it because he was already going to a meeting today. It turned out it was Captain Kim Chun and he wasn't happy that his messages were just ignored. When the guy found out who it came from, he happily responded to the invitation. Soon Doni will move to the world of the Abyss. He's already saying goodbye to old guildmates with whom he had many bright moments. His blue goggles reveal the virtual beauty of the universe. 9 years in the Abyss is quite a long time, but the first 3 months there should be fun, with lots of challenges. A couple days later at Uniseer headquarters, the guy asked about the script a joke or the truth. Sean's initial words do not match what is written in the document. Sean explained that these are dialogues that must necessarily take place. Doni just has to be silent, voice replacement, nothing more. Doni hasn't followed the script in his life, but Sean claims he can teach now. Sean's words caused a misunderstanding. Doni didn't understand why it was important. Li Lu, the Queen's voice actress, appears. She will help with the script. A girl named Li Lu came into the room. She was playing the role of the Red Queen, and hoped for a good cooperation. The voice actress of the Red Queen, surprisingly, but she didn't look like her at all, although what did he care, he thought, pretty is good. All kneel down and worship her, for she is the only ruler of the Abyss. Doni was stunned and stupefied by the beautiful lady and her enchanting voice. Doni is delighted with how Leela embodies the Red Queen, but there is still work to be done. He also appreciated the girl's skills. Sean said that Donnie will see Leela more often, so asked him not to forget her and remember her with a kind word. Donnie didn't immediately understand what Sean was implying. Was this going to be a collaboration or something more? In any case, for now there is not a moment to lose, must start practicing, because very soon the performance. After 2 weeks the update comes out, on the screen showed an impressive dark knight, people silently admired. After a long wait, it was time to launch the Abyss World, only a day left. The event to celebrate the successful launch of Abyss World will begin tomorrow. As many as 100 players will battle against a single Dark Knight. The best of the 100 was Kunt, now he's taking the stage. The guy said that rank 1 player Vols was also invited, but he won't be able to come due to personal reasons. People laughed it off and assumed the guys were texting each other. Meanwhile, the schedule showed 10 minutes to the launch of the trailer. Donnie saw himself with a microphone on the screen. It's time to get ready and show everyone what he can do. It's time to start. Donnie puts on his glasses. He has a change of smile on his face. He imagines himself popular. Character verification has been passed. Dark Knight account. Entry successful. Folks have been waiting a long time for this. Now another popular person is in the waiting area for the 1 vs 100 event. This is streamer Wraith, rating 99. The event will start soon, you need not much patience. The first premieres saved this stream. Participation in this event is pure luck. The battle will begin in a few minutes. Victory as such here is not, you need to at least survive 1 against 100. The goal is to defeat the Dark Knight. For this allotted 300 minutes, the fate of the world in the hands of the prayers for good. The Queen praised the voice actor won the audience over with the way he beautifully describes what is happening. Will order the expansion of the kingdom's borders. The Dark Knight answered the call as if he was going to conquer the server. But it is not so, he will be loyal and fulfill any orders. Poor souls, they will only suffer misery, hopelessness and agony. No life for them. Kneel before the Dark Knight. The audience assumed if the rankers got their asses kicked, then the recommendation worked. Magnify him, he now reigns in the abyss. Viewers say running from the beginning is the right thing to do. No one's going to survive anyway, so at least let them show the show. He does not care, he will last as long as he can and try to analyze his movement. To begin with, you should check at what distance the knight will start reacting to the player. If you take 10 steps per minute, you can see how he reacts to it, and then it will be clear how to proceed. People reacted indignantly and started insulting. The valiant Prince Wraith was shocked why the public was berating him instead of supporting him. The first fight was coming up. It was a clash of 2 blades. Prince Rain was surprised when he was wounded so easily. He couldn't resist properly at all. He had been warned beforehand the Dark Knight was stronger, and he didn't believe anyone. The evil Dark Prince wasn't going to stop there. He started looking for his next victim. The whole hall fell silent. People didn't even know what to say. The knight was too powerful. No one could have expected such a confrontation. One of the participants began to cry a lot. She could believe that she would have to fight with such a strong opponent. How he skillfully performed all the combat elements again and again, as well as he had excellent physical and mental talents. A guy named Kinch second place in PvP in the rankings of the Abyss. Only people like him will be able to adequately fight with such an opponent. The damage he was doing was staggeringly enormous. Soon enough, the Holy Knight would be his most common victim. But for now, he aimed at hitting the opponent's weaknesses. If done correctly, there was basically a chance of victory. Also standing next to him was a girl named Marie. She is a PvP rancher of the Abyss, just now announced the start of the second fight. The next player called Chard from the Red Sand Guild is quite famous for his high-speed paired blades. Well, it will be interesting to watch him. How long can he last? He has been treating Knight as a punching bag from the start. Let's see what happens in the end. So, the second duel began, the Dark Knight versus Chard of the Red Sand Guild. With one slight movement of his hand, the Dark Knight stripped him of all his limbs. It was a lightning strike. The presenters couldn't believe their eyes. The audience joyfully began to applaud their new idol. how quickly he was able to deal with his opponent. The Dark Knight is simply amazing. It's only been 30 minutes into the event, not a single opponent has defeated him. 30 people have already dropped out, and there is no limit to his strength, and no boundaries. A powerful and fearless warrior. If it's that bad, then none of the players are able to last even a minute. The knight hasn't received a single unit of damage yet. It's starting to feel like all the elements of the event are aimed at making sure that no one can successfully complete it. In my opinion, though, that's almost impossible, even with the large number of invited rankers. Not surprisingly, he wishes to have the ability to passively absorb damage. Currently, he's only able to block or reflect the attacks of his opponents. But if he had a passive damage resistance skill, it would really hit him. What an impressive result of your work with Unicore. His existence is linked to Akai, and if you think about it, you can probably recognize his class as a mage. Isn't that right? Indeed, it represents the Archmage, a hidden class in the profession. They specialize in using spells of immense power. How will the battle between the mage and the swordsman end? Her method involves using magic and levitation to remotely analyze her opponent. She uses tactics optimal for duels between mages and swordsmen, given the awkward position of the latter. Increasing the distance, however, does not always prove advantageous. According to the official data, the Dark Knight has a resistance to magic, which presents a challenge for her. According to the official information, the Dark Knight has a resistance to magic, so it would be hard for her to resist him. After saying the word explosion, she directed fire beams at the Dark Knight. Despite her skill, it didn't embarrass him. The Dark Knight's eyes were as scarlet as blood and eerily similar to the eyes of an angel with a scythe. They burned with a fire that could scorch any opponent. Now the knight had an ice weapon in his hands, which he could easily use to inflict deadly damage on his enemies. However, there was one condition: the new weapon must not be a spear. That was a weak point for Akai. Although a sword wouldn't reach her either, a bow or spear would suffice. The Dark Knight held a bow that was charged with electric beams. One hit, and the enemy would be finished. Akai, seeing this, cast a defense spell, hoping to repel the attack. But the spell didn't work. Damn, can someone like that exist? My shield can't withstand such a powerful attack. Akai's mana was rapidly dwindling. She needed to get down and increase the distance between herself and the Dark Knight. Akai lowered herself to the ground. It seemed to her that her mana was completely depleted. Potions could only be taken on the ground, and Akai couldn't rely on magical support. There will be a flash now, Akai said, hoping she could create a powerful technique that would give her victory. The Dark Knight expected something serious and out of the ordinary from Akai. He was ready to fight her even if she used the strongest spell. Just then, Akai noticed an arrow of lightning flying straight at her. She was horrified. She couldn't understand how it could have flown to the place where she found herself. It seemed that the Dark Knight could read minds. Akai spun around the Dark Knight, trying to get away from the arrow. But she was too fast. The arrow struck the ground next to Akai. The impact created a huge crater. Akai was in the epicenter of the funnel. She felt her body being dragged downward. All the spectators looked at what was happening with open mouths and dilated pupils. They couldn't believe what had happened. The Dark Knight had caught Akai. But how? How could he know where she would move to? It seemed as if he could see the future. It was impossible. Even the most pumped-up artificial intelligence couldn't read players' minds, or predict them. That's cheating. Even if it's just an event, it's all too overdone. It seems that the balance of the Abyss world is still not perfect, even after the release. While the audience was discussing this, 33 players failed in a battle with the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight counted his defeated opponents. There were 33 of them. He was ready to show them what he could do. The Dark Knight's enemies had arrived. They were not prepared for what awaited them. The Dark Knight spared no one. Heavenly lightning struck the battlefield. The Dark Knight wondered who could master such a powerful technique. Heroes descended from the sky. They looked beautiful and majestic. The Dark Knight didn't care who they were, how many they were, or how they came to be. They would all suffer the same fate to be defeated. Malik, the leader of the heroes, motivated his comrades. He told them that this is not the time to give up. They must be brave and not be afraid of the enemy that stands before them. Malik knew that this was their last fight. He was willing to die to protect the world from the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight watched each of them. He heard one of the heroes shout, "They will be with you from now on." He felt funny and amused. There were 3 heroes on the team, Malik, Rona, and Darik. Malik was the leader of the team and was willing to die to protect the world. Rona was a sweet and beautiful girl who was willing to fight to the end. Darik was a brave and goofy guy who was not afraid to fight the Dark Knight. Characters aren't new faces? Could it be the NPCs of the Abyss? The Dark Knight watches the clowns perform and is ready to destroy them. They call him the insignificant knight, but he only laughs. "There will be a battle," he says. "Yeah, you gotta teach the clowns a lesson. The Dark Knight has the place all to himself now. Let the creature rise from the abyss, where their suffering will be endless, and they will beg for mercy. Give them despair, my monster, let them suffer in helplessness. They don't know who you are, but they will soon realize, remaining skeletons." Malik was indignant. What the hell was wrong with his legs? Why couldn't he move them? He seemed to have fallen into a swamp that was dragging him to the bottom. This guy has the relaxed skill, but barely had he started to speak when something appeared in front of him. The partner couldn't even move in fear. Malik saw a monster from the abyss devouring its victims. The monster brought only fear, pain, horror, and agony. The hostess was horrified, unable to believe her eyes. God, what kind of nightmare had she just seen? It was Nuko, the elite monster of the abyss. I wonder if the Dark Knight can summon so many monsters. He's unrivaled. The monsters were begging for mercy. They were strong, but they wouldn't be strong enough to handle them. Tear them apart, Dark Knight. With each hero destroyed, his power grew greater and more invincible. The anchorwoman couldn't contain her panic and horror. Is this happening for real? She thought it was a dream. Most of the NPC army has been defeated. The former NPCs triggered new storylines and characters in the Abyss world. Therefore, the management devised a plan to destroy all NPCs to the Dark Knight. He realized this and now proceeded to the next victim. Lika is 88th on the Blood Captain's list of useless guilds. This is the place where the rankers were gathered, so it's no surprise that our guild members ended up here as well. Lika's gaze was determined. She had her weapon in hand, ready to overpower her opponent. The Dark Knight did not allow himself to show weakness. He was not going to lose his pride and honor. His journey had been a long one, and it wasn't over yet. People were confused about the type of this boss. How can you defeat it without taking damage? His initial performance was incredible, and his movements were so fast that it took at least 300 times to analyze them. Another victim of the Dark Knight. It's time for Kinch to get ready. It's not going to be an easy fight. The girls sitting next to him supported Kinch, saying that he was their last hope. They urged him to give his best. Kinch approached with a confident gait and a serious expression on his face. Preparing for battle was essential, and someone's life was at stake. The mercenary leader of the human race known as Cobra has met his fate as he predicted. Many brave warriors have given their lives here. It seems they have reached their limit. This pretty girl is the high priest of the holy race. Her name is Kinao. A knight of the dragon race, Beras, was their last hope for victory and heroism. Dyla, queen of the elven archers, is united by the coming events. It's time to join forces for a triumphant victory. They could no longer continue the battle, but they urged themselves to fight to their last heartbeat as long as their blood continued to flow in their veins. The glorious day had come when all the heroes joined forces to end the mayhem of evil. The power was in each of them, Kinch emphasized. The creator of the abyss decided to bestow upon the noble and brave heroes a powerful buff of energy that endowed them with abilities and power. Kinch suddenly possessed a blue sphere, creating a devastating energy that can destroy everything it touches. But can it completely defeat the Dark Knight? Kinch felt the energy encompassing his sensitive fingers. He could use it to create the element he had mastered. In the end, his last opponent was Kinch, the only one who could compete with the Dark Knight. Last Hope, of course, received a powerful buff from the creator whether players play or not. But he asks you to ignore the last of the opponents. It was time for the final battle between the Dark Knight and Kinch. The Dark Knight cried out, predicting that this place would become his grave. Kinch claimed to be 3 times stronger than before, thanks to NPC buffs. But he missed the cardinal rule of not underestimating your opponent. Within moments, the Dark Knight made an attack, flying up to Kinch and swinging his sword aptly. Kinch and the Dark Knight fought courageously, crossing swords. Neither of them gave up, each remained confident, fear unknown. Soaring upwards, the Dark Knight prepared for a fatal blow that, when raided, would leave no chance of survival. After landing, he struck Kinch's sword, creating a flame similar to the one that burned in their hearts. After repelling the Dark Knight's attack, Kinch jumped back to regain his breath and begin his counterattack. He was at a new level, but he shouldn't let his guard down. It's just a program that created a monster, and despite all the difficulties, you shouldn't give up. You have to move forward, even if it is a monster. Kinch is able to overpower the Dark Knight by following his movements, though it's nowhere near as easy as it seems. The Dark Knight felt a pain piercing through his body. He hadn't expected someone to be able to damage him. Bouncing back, he drew his sword, trying to determine the source of the danger. It became apparent that the Dark Knight was resisting the magic, but he was having a hard time with the control. A bright red beam penetrated the Dark Knight's armor, injuring him, though not fatally. It didn't stop him from moving. Impossible, he changes weapons so quickly. The beam it emitted was so powerful that it stopped the Dark Knight's movements for a few seconds. It was hard to believe that an artificial intelligence could have done this. It instantly approached Kinch, a sharp blade in its hand. Before Kinch could blink, he was seized with terror. The Dark Knight was amazed by Kinch's speed and strength. He was like a machine traveling at the speed of light. The Dark Knight grabbed Kinch's face and threw him into the ring with such force that he punched a hole in the ground. Kinch was in shock. He had never seen anything like this before. The Dark Knight attacked again. His sword pierced Kinch's body like steel pierces paper. Kinch was terrified. He knew he had lost. His strength was useless against the Dark Knight. The knight was invincible. His strength was divine. Kinch couldn't even scratch him. Kinch was unhappy with the defeat at the hands of Doni. He didn't want to stay in his shadow forever. He wanted to prove that he was as good as him. Kinch was angry and furious. He was covered in red liquid, but he wasn't going to give up. He wanted revenge on the Dark Knight. Kinch stood up, even though he knew resistance was futile. He wanted to give the Dark Knight a chance to show him how a battle between equals ended. Kinch, look at the true power of the abyss, which will wipe them all off the face of the earth so they won't suffer. The Dark Knight created a black moon in his hand and raised it to the heavens. This celestial force would destroy them all, leaving no chance for salvation. The wounded Kinch looked up at that star. It was beautiful, but the thick darkness left no hope. There was nothing he could do against the power of the gods. Kinch was horrified at what was happening. He had never seen anything like it, and he knew he never would again. The Dark Knight snapped his fingers, and a vortex formed around the moon. The moon grew bigger and more powerful until it was the size of an entire city. It was so huge and ominous that everyone was terrified. Kinch thought it was a curse, but it was only the beginning of the end. The Dark Knight counted the minutes left until they disappeared. Kinch only had a few seconds to live, and he knew he would disappear after that. He screamed that he would have his revenge. The moon enveloped its victims, and the entire ring glowed with a bright light that sizzled everything in its path. Thus ended their lives. The day after the 1 vs 100 tournament, it was evening and a dark moon was shining in the sky. Donnie was going through the comments, and suddenly he saw the viewers discussing the recent events. Kinch had performed terribly this time, and his glory days were numbered. He fought back as hard as he could, but it didn't impress the viewers. They were disappointed and angry. But Donnie paid no attention to their reaction. He knew Kinch hadn't given up yet. It's all thanks to a device that increases synchronization with the character by 25%. It doesn't feel good, but he can't deny the effectiveness of such a thing. The Abyss World servers are supposed to be open now. He thinks he should try to get in, but he's a little nervous. Putting on the goggles, he wanted to enter the virtual reality where his adventures were already waiting for him. A huge open world, bright sunshine everywhere and pure white emptiness. It was as if he were lost in space, and there was nothing familiar around him. Kinch didn't realize where he was. There was only white all around, he could only see his hands. But he didn't lose his optimism. He knew that he would definitely find something to do. His avatar was already fully created. It was exactly what his older brother had talked about. He had said that increased synchronization with the character would enhance the brain's perception. Neo, a young boy of the human race, began his adventure in a village in the northwest of the kingdom of Lurderin. The village had been destroyed by the Dark Knight, and Neo was the only survivor. Neo decided it was time to begin his journey. He must find something important to stop the Dark Knight and rebuild the destroyed village. Suddenly there was a bright flash of light in the sky. Neo couldn't understand what was happening. The village, located in the northwest of the kingdom of Lurderin, was bleak and lifeless. Neo, a young boy of the human race, was walking down an abandoned street. He was alone and felt insecure. His starting stats were unimpressive. Level 1, XP 100 units, MP 100 units, Attack 1 to 5 units, Defense 1 unit, Strength 5 units, Luck 1 unit, Dexterity 5 units, Fortitude 0 units, Faith 5 units, Reputation 0 units. Suddenly, Neo noticed a group of hooded barbarians. They were approaching him. Neo knew he had to do something. He could either fight or run away. Neo, a young man of the human race, watched a group of warriors fighting dummies. He wanted to join them, but knew it was too late. The amount of experience points gained for destroying a dummy was decreasing as the number of players attacking them increased. Neo decided to wait until the warriors had completed their quest. Neo wants to become a hero, but he needs to reach level 5 to do so. He decides to go hunting to gain experience. However, the castle guards forbid him to leave the castle until he reaches the required level. Neo thinks this is unfair, but he has no choice but to obey. Neo doesn't have to worry. The guards warn against going into dangerous locations, but the penalty for disappearing into the Abyss World is a 12-hour ban. That's a pretty severe punishment, but Neo may not sweat about such a thing. The dark forest that surrounds him is dark and empty, with nothing in sight. So Neo sees a pack of wolves who are now level 3, and he just needs experience. The hunt is about to begin. Even a small scratch can take my life, so you have to be very careful and anticipate their movements. It doesn't matter, because Neo is about to have such an exciting experience. Neo quickly made his way to the window to get ready for the hunt. He knew he needed to be in good shape to handle the wolves. The young man chopped the head off the first wolf with a single blow. He knew he had to be fast and accurate to survive. The lad was lucky that he remembered the movements of wild wolves well. He knew how they attacked and how to dodge their attacks. Great! If he keep this up, Neo can arrive even more than 30 of these wild wolves. He's killed everyone who gets in his way. But suddenly Neo saw a wolf that was many times stronger than his fellow wolves, and could easily tear Neo to pieces. Neo wondered what kind of game. Was this really the leader of a pack of wild wolves that had level 10? Wait a minute, didn't the article say they would add cursed monsters to the Abyss World? Cursed monsters are a type of elite monsters cursed by the abyss. Neo recalls something like that happening, but this one doesn't look like a damned monster at all, and there's no way it could be that simple. Well, let's try to unwind it. Neo jumped and began to attack. Raising his arm and swinging his sword, he saw the fierce gaze of the leader of the wolf pack, who was as bad as he was grinning. His persistence gave Neo the opportunity to defeat an opponent stronger than his rank. A challenge like this is not normal, he thought. When he saw the other reality, the clawed paw of a wolf appeared in front of his face. He was dumbfounded and shocked. The hellish stare of the wild dog, she with her sharp and dangerous claws, wounded Neo. This is what it means to underestimate your opponent. Neo backed away, realizing that he had just been shot. He had a duty to be very careful, vigilant, for one more mistake could cost him his life. Probably because it's a special monster, it's not as easy to destroy as he first thought. A wild dog can't be anything other than a dog. That's what he specifically told himself to cheer himself up, and give himself the mindset to fight for a long time. But at the end of the day, Neo himself chose this path, and he must not back down, must become stronger, and not be a loser. The guy waited for the moment when the dog would get too close to strike the strongest blow. It was important for him to know at what distance to keep his opponent. And so he was able to overpower a strong opponent, although he was wounded, but the risk was justified. It was a hard fight, but he succeeded. On one ordinary day, while the city was living its ordinary life, events like what happened on that day are hard to think of. But before the appearance of the first portal 10 years ago, a huge red portal suddenly appeared in the sky in front of the whole town while everything was going on as usual. This portal instantly attracted the attention of all the inhabitants. Aliens, demons, creepy creatures, they have different names, began to appear from the other side of the portal, taking the lives of all the people in their path. Neither pleas for help nor anything else helped them. In such conditions, no one knew the reasons for the portal's appearance. In the midst of this carnage, one of these creatures attacked a defenseless couple, the man holding the girl in his arms. But in an instant, the creature had taken their lives. The guy's reddened hand fell to the ground, still holding the phone that someone had called. The city museum was hosting a tour led by a young second-year student named Harry. The group was near an ancient sarcophagus that was found in 2024, made of gold and a one-piece structure. But in the middle of the talk, one of the attendees started live streaming. "Please stop broadcasting," the student asked in a flash, but to his surprise, it wasn't the exhibit she was filming, the girl stated. It turned out that the main subject in her broadcast was not the ancient sarcophagus, but Harry himself. Looking at her with surprise, Harry asked to stop the broadcast after all, as it was forbidden in the museum. Walking back to the group, the young man asked not to do that again and not to be distracted from his work. But the girl stopped him with a question. "What is in the sarcophagus itself?" At the moment there is no technology that would allow us to find out what is inside, and to protect the relic it was decided not to open it, the student answered. An alarm sounded because of a planned fire drill, and everyone was asked to leave the museum building. Our hero thought this was strange because he had not been warned, but he told everyone to get out. There was a rumbling sound, everything shook, and the birds fluttered outside the window. Harry looked out the window, and what he saw shocked him. After the shaking began, a gold-level portal appeared 3 minutes and 40 seconds later. Harry began to hear several soldiers in strange uniforms say strange things, that the tethering point was complete, that the border was opening, that they had to prepare for battle and protect the civilians. But what he was most worried about was whether all the visitors to the museum had managed to get out. Someone shouted. "Olivia, a gray-haired, young swordswoman with a small keychain in the shape of a teddy bear, is in charge. Ava is the deputy. No, I have a brother waiting for me, and yes, it will affect my ability to fight," Olivia said, rushing into the thick of things. Harry heard Olivia's name, but at the same second the woman standing next to him began to fall to the ground. The student picked her up and tried to help her up, but she coughed up red liquid. There was a rumbling sound, everything glowed red, and lightning flew from the portal. Many of the soldiers, along with Olivia, had their weapons drawn and were looking toward the portal, waiting to see what would happen. Sitting beneath the huge sarcophagus, Harry tried to make a phone call, but his machine was not picking up a connection. Deciding that his phone was useless, he reached for the girl's phone to try to call. But picking up the phone, he saw something strange. 2 red eyes were looking at him from the portal itself. A huge hand reached out of the portal, but 3 swordsmen jumped to meet it, with Olivia in the center. Noticing that something was amiss here, the red-haired swordswoman called out to the gray-haired swordswoman, stating that the portal didn't appear to her to be the same as the yellow-level portal. Delivering many stabbing sword blows to the huge arm, it did not yield any results. It turned out to be much stronger than it appeared at first glance. With one blow, the arm instantly takes the life of one of the swordsmen. Olivia is horrified and immediately realizes that 3 supports have been broken, and this will cause a hole to appear. The catastrophic level of danger forced Olivia to use all her strength, striking powerful blows with her sword. The young heroine absorbed the power of the 5 crystals, surprising her partner greatly. All the soldiers realized that they had been misinformed. The level of the portal was much more powerful than they had been told. One of the soldiers ordered everyone not to relax, for the portal might pull them in. In the heat of battle, Olivia realized that there was no easy way to deal with this portal. No matter how many blows she threw, it didn't work. It turned out that it was an illusion of the center of the portal. So they would have to find the real center. When Harry saw the huge red eyes in the reflection of the phone, he rushed away from where he was standing, terrified. But the monster in the portal didn't leave him alone. With its hand it chased after the young man. A running young man is trying to call someone, but a creepy hand catches up with the student and takes his life with one swing. After that we were shown who he was trying to call. It was Olivia. Whether she was a relative or an acquaintance, we don't know yet. But the young man's weak body was covered by something huge, something golden. Harry, reunited with heaven, was enveloped in a golden veil. "I'm in heaven," the young man whispered. "I don't know what's happening. I don't understand anything." He began to hear voices. In most of them Olivia should have retreated, but she didn't want to. She was in the heat of battle. All she cared about was defeating her enemy. With each passing second, he heard more and more how the girl did not give up, defying all orders. Even knowing it wasn't a real enemy, but his illusion, she kept fighting. But one thing wouldn't get out of his head: Olivia, his sister, the best student in the class, reliable and a little bit fiery. What is she doing there? What's going on? And most importantly, why can't he see anything? Harry agonized. He couldn't see anything, though he struggled and tried to see something. After all, his sister was there. But to his surprise, Olivia came through in a second. With one swift and powerful blow she broke through the veil and harmed her own brother. The battle continued, and this time the giant hand decided to strike. It used its power to penetrate through Olivia's defenses, which caused a deep shock. Because just seconds ago it was just an illusion. The soldiers who were in the battle rejoiced as the monster began to materialize. But it turned out to be a big disadvantage. The monster turned out to be much stronger than the swordswoman. However, they didn't lose heart, unlike her brother who was trying to shout at her every second to get her sister to retreat from the battle. After all, her defeat was inevitable. Watching the unequal battle, Harry sees that after a few quick attacks from his sister, the monster strikes back, which penetrates through the defenses and ends the battle instantly, striking Olivia. Seeing Olivia fall, Harry begins to remember all the mistakes he has made. He realizes that he never asked her what was going on at school, why she was missing so much and not coming home. It is only now that he realizes what it was all for. But Harry couldn't stop until it was too late. He tried to ask his little sister to stop, and he succeeded. Olivia heard her brother's voice. But hearing the words didn't stop the swordswoman, they only raised her fighting spirit. He realizes that he can't just give up. If she loses, the consequences will be catastrophic, and the entire city will fall. Rising from her knees, Olivia prepared for the last round. Clenching her teeth, gathering all her strength for the final blow, the swordswoman made one last dash towards the demon, gaining so much power that the wind currents created circles behind her, as if she was flying faster than sound. Screaming in agony, Harry is still trying to distract his sister from the unfair fight. But in an instant, something happens. Harry opens his eyes abruptly. He begins to smell a strange odor, the smell of a hospital. "What, am I still alive?" whispered the hero. Recovering, Harry looked around to see where he was. It was a hospital room, but there was something unusual about it. Instruments were hooked up to Harry, and the machines showed that he had no pulse. But this did not mislead the hero for long. Behind the door he heard a familiar voice. It was Olivia. At the same second he jumped out of bed, but to his surprise he had no time to say anything, as Olivia with a smile on her face said, "Brother, you're awake." Olivia did not hold back her tears, but was glad that her brother was alive. But it wasn't her that was surprised, it was Harry. For some reason his sister looked younger. At that moment she seemed like a little sister, though Harry knew his sister had long since graduated from junior high school. Harry tried to reassure his sister, but she didn't believe him. After all, he had been hit by a car and died at the hands of an alien. When he looked back, he noticed that it was 2042, which meant that it had been 4 years since Harry had been hit by a car and put into a coma. What Harry realized didn't stun him, but rather lifted his spirits. Now he would be able to protect his sister. But while Harry was talking to his sister, a man entered the room. He introduced himself as Leo, the commander of the Nighthawks. However, Harry didn't listen to him and slammed the door shut sharply. Olivia tried to tell her brother not to slam the door on the man who had helped her when he was hit by the car, but Harry said that no one just helps, that free cheese only comes in a mousetrap. But his sister explained to him right away that she knew about it because the stranger told her right away that he would help her, but she had to go study with him to help the community. Harry began to think that even if he didn't let his sister go to study with this man, it wouldn't be able to save her for long, because those monsters would attack, and she would have a chance to study so they would learn how to fight. And it will be especially important for Harry to have the strength to protect his sister. Harry decided to go outside to thank Mr. Before he went out, he asked his sister to help with the discharge. As he opened the door, he noticed that Leo was standing right outside the door, as if he had overheard their entire conversation with his sister. Once in the elevator, Harry started talking to Leo. He let him know that he knew all about portals, aliens, and most importantly, that he wanted Olivia to join his squad. But the man immediately began to explain to him not to accuse him of anything, that what he noticed in his little sister is not perversion, but that she has an incredible talent that will help save people. Leo persuaded Harry to let his sister join the squad because it might save all the people, but to his surprise the boy agreed, which shocked him. But Harry didn't just agree, he had conditions that had to be met in any case or Olivia wouldn't go anywhere. "Day, what do you want?" asked Leo in surprise. But Harry stated that the only condition would be that he would enroll with his sister. And he didn't care if he was going to be a warrior or a commoner, but he had to be near his sister. Harry's enrollment was not a problem, but his enrollment in the war band was difficult, because he was an ordinary man, not gifted like his sister. Walking home from the hospital after being discharged, on a positive note thinking they will be cooking a delicious meal at home to celebrate his recovery, Harry notices a bruise that was a side effect of the treatment. But looking closer, he noticed it was a cadaver stain, which shocked him. Olivia noticed that her brother had lost his appetite and was pale. But Olivia noticed that her brother had lost his appetite and was pale. Harry reassured his sister, telling her that a decreased appetite after a coma was normal. After lunch, he gathered up the dirty dishes and went to wash them. Standing alone with his thoughts, he began to ponder the fact that he had stopped wanting to eat and didn't need sleep. But one thing scared him the most. After a few checks and tests and readings, Harry realized for sure that his machine was not broken in the hospital. He really had no pulse, and the bruise on his arm did indicate a cadaver stain, though. The only explanation that came to his mind was that he was a walking corpse. The only more logical explanation was that the magic of the ancient sarcophagus had transported his soul back 4 years to the day he came out of his coma after the car accident. Thus, it was as if his life had been rewound back in time. The young man was saved by the fact that no one had noticed his condition so far, and he quietly continued to walk as a normal student. After a while, he decided to find out when he could go to the academy with his sister. When he called Leo, he found out that he had been accepted, but there was one condition: he had to score 90 points in all subjects, otherwise he would be expelled. After the summer vacation, the young brother and sister arrived at the academy after all. Walking around the large territory and looking at the local sites, Olivia noticed that instead of the monument of Confucius stood some other person who was considered important in this academy. But while our heroes were walking around the territory, someone was following them. The one who was keeping an eye on the new students was a man who introduced himself as Roma, the tutor in charge of admissions for the special classes. Suddenly he dropped some bag with Harry's things, and Olivia approached him and offered to walk together to the discussion to tell him what, where and how. Noticing that Roma was overly insistent on telling Olivia that the academy was doing well, with sports fields and art galleries, Harry grabbed him by the shoulder and, without being rude, explained that they could take it from there. Stepping away from their future mentor, Harry and Olivia put on the gear they had been given, which was an electronic watch. A few minutes later, they were handed over. "Dear freshman, please hurry up and finish your registration and go to the military assembly." Harry looked at it with a surprised face. A lot of freshmen were frantic, some crying, shaking with nerves, for the watch they had been given was making an incessant irritating sound and vibration. Only our Harry sat with repose, though Olivia was almost as well, but was already on edge. Olivia couldn't help herself, she begged her watch to stop, and after a while it did stop making noise. Harry thought that they only stopped buzzing after some code phrase, but it looked like someone was controlling them. "Everyone be quiet!" shouted a very beautiful and slender woman with large breasts and gray hair. After her words, all the clocks stopped making any sound. People began to look at each other and noticed that this academy seemed to accept students regardless of age, because next to our heroes stood a man over 40 years old. The big-breasted beauty introduced herself as Scarlet. She is the supervisor of the academy's freshmen and was ready to answer any question, but on one condition: if the students passed the military test. However, Olivia was left out of the loop as she is still a junior high school student. Scarlet, noticing that a lot of students were puzzled, began to complain. After all, in the document they had just been given, it was written that the academy was not responsible for the lives of the students during military training. Therefore, she clarified that if someone does not agree to get such a useful experience and pass the test, they can leave the academy that second. After these words, the students began to sign, but were cautiously hesitant. Except for our hero, because he already realized that he was a corpse, and he himself was not worried about his life. The main thing is that Olivia got admission without taking the test. While the students were signing documents, someone unknown was watching Harry. Noticing that, he quickly signed without thinking. After the students started to get into their cars, as Harry got into his car, the stranger approached him and tilted his head to say something. The stranger said that if Harry was in trouble, have him hide and call the clock. This bonus was for correctly answering the call that had been searched for in the clock a little earlier. But Harry was not pleased. He was outraged as to why his sister's watch wasn't turned off as well. The stranger teasingly replied that he just liked Olivia's voice. The cars started moving, and Harry had no time to speak to the stranger. Growling that if he found him he would kill him, he remained unsatisfied. After a while the cars arrived at a mountain with a thick forest, and began to line up near the cars for further instruction. Scarlet told the essence of the trial. They are now in a place of artificial crystal cultivation, that is, this place is an artificial border with several reference energy points. They are to live for 3 days. In addition, they were given a briefcase with everything they would need for the duration of the test. On this mission, you don't have to get deep into the forest or anywhere else. The main thing is to survive and discover your own talents. The students all have watches that scare away small alien races. However, just in case they find themselves in trouble, the watches can be used to summon help. Before the students take the test and step into the portal, they are warned that they are all human after all and should help each other. But if anyone harmed another person, they would be immediately expelled and court-martialed. At the test, the students decided to divide into squads, and it was not forbidden, but there was a condition that there should not be more than 6 people in one squad. Harry was trying to find a squad, but he couldn't find one until a girl approached him. She offered Harry to join their squad, but at the same second she was called by her teammates, saying that they had no vacancies, even though there were only 4 people in the squad. But our hero decided not to interfere and just continued looking for another group. While the hero gave up hope of finding a team, he noticed someone following him. So he decided to escape from the starting point very quickly. While walking through the forest, the hero read notes about local aliens, particularly the snow snake. This snake was very interesting to the hero. It hunted by choosing the temperature, but it did not have a particularly strong attack. It had only average damage. But it was able to freeze its victims. Having chosen a target, Harry rushed to kill the snake and get the crystals out of it. Running through the forest, the hero came across a strange place where the whole ground was covered with ice. It was the lair of the frost snakes, which were crawling on the tops of trees. Noticing a couple of snakes, Harry immediately took out a knife and prepared for a fight. However, the snakes did not attack the hero, they began to fight among themselves. Wrapped around each other, the snakes fought hard. However, one of the snakes managed to use its tail to try to hit Harry. The hero quickly dodged and struck back. But at the last moment, before the knife blade pierced the skin of the snake, he stopped the blow. For something strange had happened. It was as if the snake did not react to Harry. Remembering a paragraph from the anti-alien manual that stated that a snake searches for prey using temperature, Harry realized the situation. Practically being a walking corpse, he had no blood temperature, as the processes of living organisms did not exist in him. Realizing this, he delivered a powerful blow that immediately blew the snake's head off. The snake immediately began to fuse back together to restore the head to the body. Noticing this, the student decided to strike several consecutive blows and the snake failed to fuse back together. As a result, the snake fell and a blue crystal appeared after its fall. Looking at the clue that appeared after picking up the crystal, the young man decided to absorb it. In the process of absorbing it, the entire area around the hero lit up with a blue light. It wasn't clear to him yet whether he was lucky with this decision or not. The crystal was able to swallow, not just the crystal, but all the abilities that Frost Snake had, freezing the enemy and so on. Is it a miracle? Because everyone like them didn't believe that he would be able to swallow the crystal at all. The strangers watching Harry from the bushes were also watching the squad that denied him entry. The squad discussed that it was very difficult to absorb a crystal, and even a full successful absorption was only 0.03%, practically making you one of the strongest. However, they were not desperate, and decided to go looking for crystals. The unknown squad consisted of 5 people, and they decided to break their watch earlier, even though the watch was very important to the test. They decided to wait out the entire test, then attack the squad that had successfully absorbed the crystal, and try to take possession of everything they could. Watching all of this, the instructors were very unhappy with the behavior and participation of the squads, especially the one that decided to go into the woods without equipment. Discussing this point, Scarlet offered to send help there, but the man in glasses immediately refused. In his opinion, if a couple of fools died, it would not hinder, but on the contrary, might even help. Meanwhile, Harry was testing his abilities. He was freezing berries on trees, using the heat vision he had inherited from a snake. After these experiments, his end-of-life immunity ability seemed useless. After absorbing the crystal, His body temperature didn't return, but the corpse stains disappeared. Having such abilities, he decided to test something. Kicking a tree, a snake immediately fell from it, which he destroyed in one blow. Did the guy finally find a solution? The regeneration can be stopped if the snake is deprived of a limb. Also, when the snake lost its life, it left behind a crystal, which was decided to absorb into itself. With this, Harry's personal skills increased several levels up, and there was one new one called regeneration. It turns out that you can pump up with the help of similar crystals. One crystal guarantees one upgrade, but it is not yet known how the upgrade will be after the yellow level. We'd have to kill a couple more snakes to find out. So Harry moved deeper into the forest to find them. The guys from the opposite team were wandering through the woods. They were getting farther and farther off the main road. Their main task at the moment was to find Harry, which they thought was the perfect opportunity to defeat him while he was alone. On the way, the guys came across the body of a snake that the guy had destroyed. It was a good lead for them, so the victim is somewhere nearby. It's actually a bit alarming how this guy managed to handle a snow snake all by himself. It's not something a normal person can do. Then a little farther away, the boys spotted 3 more of these snakes, a real reason to wonder if there was any point in messing with Harry or not. Based on all this, the theory was that this freak had already absorbed the crystal. But if he came prepared in the first place, we'd have to find out. Most of the team wanted to give up and not continue the search, because they were really scared, but the captain of the team said that they couldn't give up, because if they didn't deal with Harry now, he would get even stronger, and then there would be no chance. Meanwhile, the guy was in a place where just an incredible number of these snakes, most likely he was going to destroy them all that you raise your level and further. But thanks to his sense, he recognized that someone is chasing him. It turned out to be 5 people who became in a circle. But what kind of people? The first thing they did was to ask the kid to surrender, otherwise he would be deprived of his life. Apparently, these people needed crystals, of which the boy had a large amount at one point. As he absorbed them, he had nothing on his hands. Of course, no one believed him, because not everyone can absorb this kind of product, especially at such a young age. All the other snakes that these guys saw were not destroyed, but simply stunned. But in any case, these freaks came here to rob. We need to teach them a lesson so that this will not happen again in the future. In front of everyone, Harry took out his bag and dumped the contents on the floor. I wanted to dissuade the villain from attacking him. But there was only anger and rage in his eyes, and until he was convinced of it, he would not let go. To save himself, I had to invent a little legend that there were originally 4 crystals on his hands. Harry tried to absorb them and they just disappeared. The villain was even more angry. He could not understand how could he think of trying to absorb crystals without the help of an instructor. If it was that simple, then every fool could get into the special class. Now the most important task is to keep the body in good order and not get any injuries. Looks like this man has no intention of fighting. We need to chase him away and get all the crystals from these snakes. Since the guy didn't have any crystals, he was told to leave the watch and get the hell out of here, to which he graciously agreed. Then the guys in the gang also asked him to give them the knife. The captain was against it. He was worried Harry wouldn't attack them with that knife. In fact, it sounded funny, because the only one who wanted someone else's red liquid here was the captain. It almost came to a fight, but one of the gang intervened and told the boys not to shoot at each other, but to disperse. He stepped on a snake and stunned all the snakes that were around. They came to their senses and ran to attack this team of weak-minded bandits. They'd better not do any more stalking or the next time the punishment will be much harsher. As soon as the captain took the watch in his hands, he immediately heard a huge pack of snakes approaching. Everyone was shocked that they were really alive. It is necessary as soon as possible to run away from here, because just one bite of such a creature can only human life. No one will not be able to help. It would seem at first glance as such a powerful and strong bandit, and when he saw the snakes began to run to the peaceful area faster than anyone else. It wasn't worth it for those bandits to take his things. Karma would come quickly for such actions. Harry was already familiar with them before, but they didn't have much of a relationship with the man. The name of this woman who ran up to the guy was Jessica. She was wondering how he got here. Without any details, Harry just said he was mugged, and then these people went to destroy the monsters, but they're probably finishing up. The guy who came with this girl was named Jack. He was always trying to get away from this guy because he had a personal grudge against him. But because Jessica is a very good-natured person, she realized that you can't just leave this guy to his fate. Jack was very reluctant to invite him to his team, but he was willing to do anything for his girlfriend. Harry knew he wasn't welcome here, so he didn't want a place on this team. But if he stopped eating and drinking, it would not end well, and it would be inconvenient to destroy monsters without a knife, so he would go with them just to get his backpack, which contained all the necessary things for normal survival. On arrival at the place, the guys found a large number of snakes, which simply tempted the whole team of bandits. Only 1 man out of 5 gave even the slightest signs of life, and it lasted a short time. He asked for help, but the snake did not leave him the slightest chance for life. The boys couldn't understand why there were so many snakes here. And when they started to move in their direction, Jack and his friend broke away and ran in an unknown direction. They called out for the boy to come with them, but he didn't care. I wonder if a bunch of snakes scared them that much. On the other hand, maybe it was a good thing they'd run away, but no one else would know that Harry could easily mine crystals, destroying those things with a slight flick of his hand. They ended up with a huge number of them, and right now the absorption process will begin. After that, the guy will improve his skills significantly, and become many times stronger. The experiment made it clear that to improve the level from yellow to green requires 10 crystals. Further improvement will follow the same principle. The probability of pumping skills with the help of 1 crystal was confirmed, because it was possible to improve freezing to the green 3rd level, but the regeneration remained yellow. Apparently some force just does not allow it to improve. I'm sure the other people think that a mere human can't absorb the crystal. In ordinary people, after a failed absorption, the crystal would simply vaporize. Thanks to the fact that the guy's strength had increased significantly, he could now destroy snakes just in an instant, and collect several times more crystals, which are so necessary for improvement. In no way could anyone find out how many crystals Harry had already absorbed. Meanwhile, the organizers are already a little nervous. Usually around this time, with the help of the clock, people begin to call the instructor to help them, but nothing happens. Perhaps something went wrong and it's time to help them themselves, so as not to trigger this situation. The second organizer, whose name is Charlie, had a slightly different opinion on the matter. He was not in a hurry to help the participants. In his opinion, a small show should be organized first. In the meantime, Jack and his girlfriend brought a specialist to the place where 5 bodies of young boys were lying, so that he could adopt the cause of the deprivation of life. The expert determined that most of the wounds were snake bites, but there was 1 stab wound. 3 watches were out of order, their batteries were dead. Now it's time to review the video footage that was taken right at the time of the incident. The guys, when they were attacked by snakes, tried to scare them off with a sound wave, which can be turned on the watch if necessary. But for some reason it did not work, so they abandoned their comrade, who had already been caught by the viper, and made an attempt to escape. The situation was very critical, so the unscrupulous captain put a knife in the back of his comrade so that he would fall down and the snakes would be distracted by him. Harry led this team straight to the snake's nest and indirectly destroyed them with the snakes. That's the theory of the expert. If you look around, there's at least 30 snakes, so why didn't they attack Harry himself? That was an interesting question because the examiner didn't see the guy using any magic. It was decided to continue the military training, and in parallel find out what really happened here. Harry has enough cunning, bravery, and cold calculation. It's impressive. If he does come back alive after the training, we'll have to be sure to ask him a few questions. Meanwhile, in the academic canteen, sat Olivia and Leo. Today was the first day she came to study. She really liked it here, because the institution was beautiful, the dormitory was huge, the teachers were kind, the food in the canteen was delicious, everything was super. Leo handed the little girl a phone that had a satellite function on it. It would keep her connected wherever the user was. Since Harry had told his sister not to take anything from the hands of strangers, the girl began to refuse. This thing should not be viewed as a gift, but as a loan. There would be unlimited time to earn money for a new one, and this then needed to be paid back. In this case, Olivia decided not to be modest, and took this gorgeous phone for herself. Then the men decided to inquire about Harry's whereabouts. He was very angry when he found out about the military training, because he didn't understand how an ordinary person could be poisoned for military training. What the hell were they thinking at the academy? If something happened to him, all of Harry's relatives would hate Leo. To at least try to straighten things out, a phone call would have to be made immediately. His sister thought her brother might be in danger, but Leo said he was sure he was fine, so as not to alarm the baby. Let's hope he's okay. Meanwhile, Scarlet was sitting outdoors, preparing to have lunch with her partner. Suddenly a man named Thomas came up to them. He was from the Fengluan team. He had come here for a mission, and now he needed to meet with the commander to clarify the data. Scarlet recognized him right away, the same guy who was number 68 on the global list. She is furious that no one thought to warn the organizer about the postponement of the military exercises. Thomas's task is to save the student who is shown in the photo. He needs to know at least an approximate place where he can be. According to the latest information, he had poisoned himself in the safe zone, but no one could say if he had gotten there. Thomas decided not to even listen to what he was being told and ran towards the safe zone so as not to lose a minute. Military training seems to be going well, so what could have happened all of a sudden? There's no word on that yet, but he said he had some information about Thomas. When he found out that his brother was sick and only the snow snake crystal could help, he applied to come here. But there's a problem. The man suffers from a severe form of facial blindness. Well, as long as the students are being watched, nothing bad should happen. If they follow the pre-planned route, Thomas will go straight to the snake's nest. The main thing is to catch it. There are several snakes there. When he arrived at the place, the man noticed a destroyed snake. Most likely it was done by a man who does not know how to wield a sword at all. Then Harry could be seen on the horizon, tearing those snakes mercilessly just to get the crystal. He had an academy knife in his hands, an excellent weapon, but how could it be handled like that? Thomas couldn't stand this outrage. He walked up to the guy and said, "If the knife could show emotion, he would have cried. That's not how you wield a knife." Harry looked at him indignantly and couldn't understand why anyone cared how the sword worked. If there was a better way, then suggest it, not just criticize it. Thomas was surprised, because any other student would have been embarrassed long ago and gone somewhere else. The academy had given him only this knife, and no one had told him how to use it. Thomas told the boy to go away and never come back, and allowed him to take only one snake, which was already half sawed. But wasn't he ashamed to take booty from a man who had just begun his military training? Since it was a shared territory, the first-come first-served rule doesn't work here. And as for the snakes, they would go to the strongest. With the help of magic, Thomas was able to extract large numbers of snakes with great speed. Harry was very surprised when this master handled the snake with a single blow. It meant he was definitely a professional. His weapons were similar to what people used to use in the past, if this was official equipment. Since Thomas had no idea how strong Harry was, he felt very safe. An experienced warrior came to fight monsters alongside students. There is clearly something wrong. To protect himself, the guy decides to freeze this master. As well, he is not used to having his prey stolen from him, whoever it was. Then Harry pounces on him and starts beating him with all his might. For some reason there was too much density. The guy's bones are about to turn to dust, and this guy didn't even get hit. Since he didn't look like a villain, we could leave him like that. While Thomas was immobilized, Harry decided to graciously use his good knife. When the freeze was over, Thomas went to Charlie's house. He was just sitting in the fresh air, doing his work on his laptop. By the way, there were a lot of abrasions on the master's face. Maybe they appeared after the freeze was over. Charlie laughed when he saw the picture. A true friend. His wounds were not great, but his teachings were enormous, and his weapons must have been stolen. Thomas begged to be healed as soon as possible. He was returned to the state he had been in 24 hours ago. Afterward, they decided to sit down and talk about it. Charlie tried to track down the student who did it, couldn't do it because he couldn't see the watch signal on the screen. Currently, the only member who could wear the watch is Harry, but his watch was taken by the guys from the other gang. The guy beat up the master so badly that he didn't even remember his face to testify. Since everything was over, we need to forget this situation and focus on the original task, namely to get at least a couple of snow snake crystals. Because of the fact that Harry took all the snakes for himself, other people wandered in the forest for days and not find a live snake, and this particular guy got lost. Also, very often there were signs that said repair the road, how to move around here, if there are repairs everywhere. It was all Thomas's doing. He purposely made the students wander around the forest to get as many snakes as possible, which is already very few. The newcomers would have to wait for the older uncles to deal with their issues. Meanwhile, Harry came to another area where there should be a large number of snakes, but someone beat him to it and wiped them all out. It was probably Thomas. It was decided to climb the hill and see what was around. The first thing that caught his eye was the mountain, which was not on the map that was given out at the academy. It was worth trying your luck there. After climbing so far, the guys still managed to find a couple of snakes, but it's not enough. But even through them, the guy managed to increase his levels a bit more. The freezing time was increased to 2 minutes. With enough energy it can be used several times, so the time can be made much longer. Due to the lack of hunger, thirst, and fatigue, the guy is a bit time-starved. Maybe it's already time to go back. Suddenly the guy starts to feel like there is someone right behind his back. A very strong move. It turned out to be just a huge snow snake that wanted to slowly destroy the guy. But when Harry found her, she immediately attacked him, so as not to leave any chance for salvation. But Harry wasn't as simple a guy as he looked, so he dodged the attack. Because it was happening too fast, he did get hurt a little. This snake is very dangerous, so he had to heal right away. Objectively, there is very little chance of victory. I need to test the new freeze on him. Having used the spell, the only thing left was to hope for the most favorable outcome. The spell worked almost perfectly, it just needed a larger dosage for such a huge monster. Harry wouldn't part, and started freezing her just in all directions so that she definitely couldn't move for a certain amount of time. As soon as the ice cracked somewhere, the guy immediately added more freezing. Then, without wasting an opportunity, took his new weapon in his hands and tried to destroy the snake. Everything was successful, but after so many frosts, almost all the strength had been used. Now we should try to find the crystal in this huge carcass. Meanwhile, all the participants were already gathering in the clearing, at least those who had managed to survive. There was still half an hour until the end of the gathering. All the students who had already shown up should come to Scarlet to register. The freak who had abandoned his whole team and stolen Harry's watch had also reached the clearing. By the way Thomas was following him, he was sure it was the man who had beaten him up, but it wasn't. This scared big guy only had Harry's watch. It was a pretty big problem, where to find the student he needed, and if he didn't come, it would be Thomas's problem alone. And now Charlie would give the young man a chance to justify himself, but it was unlikely that he would succeed, because the truth was long known. At the moment Harry was trying his best to get the crystal, he had almost completely taken the whole snake apart. Only the head was left, if he didn't do everything as soon as possible, otherwise it would regenerate and be as good as new again. A couple of deft movements, and the crystal flies out to its new owner. After absorbing such a powerful item, the guy will get a new skill called Explosion of Icy Red Liquid. The essence of it is that all abilities are increased by 1200%, lasting 30 seconds. After using it, weakness comes for 48 minutes. The guy had already received his punishment for his evil deeds, namely he would be sent to the tribunal. He started begging to be destroyed here, but it was too weak a punishment. Thomas couldn't calm down. He thought that Charlie had given him the wrong coordinates on purpose. At the moment, the only thing that mattered was that Harry still hadn't returned. The kids asked the instructor to take the students to the academy, and they would stay here and wait for the boy, and then drive home in Thomas's car. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. How could a rude teacher like Charlie let the kids who were late come back so easily? It certainly doesn't make any sense to make a circus in front of the instructor. The teachers liked Harry, so if Thomas was going to retaliate, he just had to do it without too much violence, to leave him unharmed. And so began their long wait, Thomas rocking the whole time and Charlie on his phone. 7 hours, what does he think he is? Who does he think he is? It was hard to imagine it would take that long. Charlie would kill the guy himself when he got there, because nerve cells don't regenerate. As suddenly Harry appears on the horizon, he was all battered and exhausted. Since no one was there, he thought he'd come too early. The first thing that caught Thomas's eye was his weapon, which was virtually destroyed. Its condition could have been better. He hadn't felt such anger at the students in a long time. He didn't think long. He tied the boy with shadows so that he wouldn't move and ran to attack. Thomas must have hit him too hard, because the guy is passed out and won't get up, but what to do with him if he does lose his life? Harry was thrown as much as 10 meters away. It seems this shadow has range too. The guy needs to find a way to stay away from them. I wonder what they are whispering about. Charlie said that Harry had caused the people from the opposite team to be bitten by snakes. All the evidence was there. Based on everything that was going on, the guy had a picture in his head that there were 2 men standing in front of him, one of whom had been poaching during the scientist's time, and the other who just didn't say anything. Probably they conspired and want to destroy him. So he decided not to stall for time and attack first. Thomas urged him to give up, because it was almost impossible to break through his defenses. Charlie had a hunch that Harry had a trump card up his sleeve, and he was curious to find out what it was. To achieve his goal, he decided to provoke the boy and told him that when he was gone, his little sister would be in trouble, too. After that, Harry's mind snapped to the fact that no one has the right to say anything bad about his sister, let alone threaten her. For such statements, the boy would punish absolutely anyone, no matter who was standing in front of him. Thomas was clearly starting to panic, and Charlie was trying to stay as calm as possible, to survive. Harry used a skill that improves all skills by 1,200%. Unfortunately, it's only for 30 seconds, but no matter, the guy will take full advantage of that time. The guy threw a huge ice wave towards the men. Thomas turned to ice in a second, and Charlie was still holding on. It was an incredible power. If it wasn't for the protection, there wouldn't have been a speck of it left. But it wasn't over yet. The surrounding temperature was very low. Everything would freeze in seconds. It takes a lot of energy for this skill. Harry lost almost all of his power in one use. You can't delay, you have to finish it. When the power ran out, the guy took his gun in his hands and wanted to make a shot, but he couldn't do it, because just in a moment it froze, too, right in his hands. It looked like the guy had exhausted not only all his strength, but also his luck. In the end, the exhausted guy just fell to the ground, and a red liquid began to ooze out. The men were shocked, to put it mildly, if with the help of amplification, it is possible to increase in such a large number of times. They slowly approached the boy and began to try to heal him. They couldn't just let him lose his life. Because of the lack of strength, Charlie also fell unconscious. Thomas was the only one who could stand on his feet. He had to drag the 2 of them to his car. Why can't that idiot Charlie stop getting into trouble? It was already late at night. The guys were put in the hospital. The device shows that Harry no longer has a pulse, and the temperature has dropped. Is there really no way to save him? Suddenly Charlie runs into the room and says that everyone quickly get out of here. The guy is just in a state of ambrosia, and the doctors have already written him off. Well, what a horror. Thomas had warned him that the guy's body even had cadaver stains on it. Charlie didn't let that stop him. He just started doing his job. He could tell if the guy was really alive or not, so he just had to wait a couple of days, and then it would be clear. It had been 2 days. Charlie had been discharged from the hospital, and the boys were standing around waiting for Harry to come back to life. Suddenly he started giving signs of life and trying to say something. He didn't like that the men were yelling too much, so he told them to shut up. The boys even had time to argue among themselves whether it was the anabiosis state, or whether he had really lost his life. Harry couldn't understand when the two of them had become such good friends. Olivia had been texting a lot over the past 2 days, saying that she was doing well and so on, and she wanted Harry to call her when he came to. Charlie formally introduced himself, and said that what happened to Harry was all his fault, so he apologized. On behalf of the entire student council, the boy was invited to join them. Harry pretended that he still didn't understand what was going on, and then sharply struck his fist in the face of his offender. He flew back to where he came from, and that's without even using magic. Now the acquaintance was definitely a success. Leo was talking to Olivia, and he brought her some crystal, telling her to take it in her hands and try to feel the energy inside. Scarlet was also with them, controlling the whole process. The probability of absorbing the crystal was a bare statistic. In fact, it all depended solely on a person's talent and mental state. Everyone hoped that the girl would be able to realize and absorb it today. This world is full of monsters, and only warriors can defeat them. The reason why Uncle Leo is so kind to Olivia and Harry is that he counts on the girl and hopes that all this upbringing will turn out to be a fat plus for him. Then the little girl finally meets her baby brother. He really freaked her out. The guy's uniform changed because he joined the student union and became a member of the disciplinary committee. There's also talk of a week's vacation after military training. Harry must have been assigned to this particular class for a reason. He wondered if anything interesting had happened while he was away. Olivia said it was no big deal, but the only thing was that she was given a fire crystal that she absorbed. Now she just had to become the strongest warrior and protect everyone. Even in this life, the little girl couldn't escape the fate of a team leader. The only thing a guy can help her with is to become even stronger to protect. As a result, after being absorbed, the girl gained 2 abilities, super speed and heavenly origin. She decided to demonstrate what she was capable of at the same time, and with a single kick, she was able to smash a stone statue, which was really quite powerful compared to before. Even though she had gotten stronger, it would not save her from responsibility for property damage. She would have to pay later. The boys wrote a note of explanation. This time Scarlet forgave her and asked her not to break anything else. Jay would not be made to pay. Was it not an overly kind gesture? For Harry's good behavior at the military training camp, Scarlet suggested that he too absorb the crystal and could lend his help. The boy thanked her for such kindness, but said he would do everything himself. Did no one tell her anything? Scarlet realized that the guy wasn't interested in this at all, but at least he could make it less obvious. She also noticed the uniform of the student council. Charlie was going to find a receiver at the training camp. Meanwhile, Harry and his new mentors are already getting a tour of the new building. To put it mildly, it looked very nice. The students had their own gym and a large living space. The boy had asked for a room for himself, a room for one, which the president of the board could do. Thomas remembered that he had promised to teach the boy how to use a gun. So the first lesson would start right away. In the end, the training was very long. The guys tried absolutely all kinds of weapons that were available. The trainers were lying on the floor and could not move, and Harry was full of strength and energy. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a suggestion to eat and then return to the training. There was a snack bar on the 2nd floor, but the trainers still could not walk. The men couldn't understand why this guy didn't feel tired. The teachers were already so tired and the guy didn't even have time to master cold weapons. Usually warriors who enter the academy have good fighting skills. They grasp everything in about 10 minutes. But this guy couldn't handle swords or pistols or anything. But at least he went and brought his teachers some food and tasty drinks. He is not so hopeless. The boys drank the drink with gusto, and it was as if they had come alive again. In that case, Harry suggested to continue, for a 3-minute break after a 10-hour training session is too little, and the trainers fell to the floor again. According to them now they were only half alive, need another can. Finally it was decided to rest a little longer. Harry went to the other end of the room, picked up a can, and standing with his back to the trash can threw it right in there. It was a near-perfect hit. Maybe that's his hidden talent. Thomas asked him to throw it again, just 2 at a time. Without a second thought, the boy did it, and again, it was a perfect hit. From this, Thomas concluded that Harry's best bet was a hidden weapon that he could suddenly reach for and throw. It might make sense to use the crystal of the plains badger. He's fearless and good at fighting, and he's got a good sense of smell. A punch of rage would help him build up his abilities faster, and he wouldn't need a weapon at all. Once the teacher encountered one of these on a mission, after activating the ability his battle power increases by 10 times. In such a state, to resist him is very difficult. In the end, it took 3 squads to destroy him. But now there is a question of where to get the crystal, because it is no longer from a regular badger, but from the royal. Since Thomas had failed to teach the boy how to use the weapon, he promised to find the crystal as compensation. It was decided to return to his hometown, and then as soon as everything was ready, Thomas would send a letter to the academy's address. It did seem weird. The man just left at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wonder if Harry is some kind of demon in her eyes. Charlie said that Thomas wasn't afraid of anyone, he just wanted to finish his training so he could find crystals for his brother, namely snow snake crystals with immunity to life deprivation. All the crystals that Thomas had managed to collect in the forest, he brought to his brother, even if the hope of recovery is small, but it is worth a try. He wasn't quite satisfied because the real cause of his illness was the Fong family, not the crystals, but he took them nonetheless. The shadowy servant had now acquired the ability to be immune to the taking of life. That same evening, a courier arrived for Harry under the house, and brought a delivery in his name. In the future, if one more time to use the delivery service over the phone, you can get a discount of as much as 20%. It must be those badger crystals, looks very nice, even put a note. It turned out to be a love letter that said, "Ever since you left that day without saying goodbye, I can't sleep or eat. And I didn't think we'd meet again someday. See you at the fishing pier on September 15th at 8 p.m. Did that guy write that note, or was it some woman?" The letter was probably not addressed to Harry, so it was decided to just put it aside and give it to Charlie the next time they met. The boy decided not to wait too long, and started getting crystals right outside. After receiving a huge amount of positive effects, and increasing levels, the guy grabbed the sword and began training. Now everything was completely different. He finally understood what the sword is for and how to use it. In combat conditions, you can say Thomas coped with his task perfectly. Meanwhile, in the student conference room, one of the students was voicing his displeasure about the freshman Harry. He was against the boy being accepted into this group, since when could someone like him join them? Putting a boy like him as a member of the disciplinary committee is ridiculous. The students demanded an explanation from Charlie as to why this guy was put in the group. Because you can't take anyone, it's a very responsible position. The members of the disciplinary committee must be clearly distinguished by their strength and manners. While Harry was in the middle of a committee discussion, he was sitting in a lecture and listening intently to the teacher. This class was all about crystals, and how to take them from a lifeless creature. This topic brought up some interesting questions. And if a person is deprived of life, does the crystal fall off of them as well or not? You can't compare the structure of a human being to that of other races, so no. Finally, it was time for lunch. Harry and Olivia sat at the same table and discussed how everyone was doing. For some reason, the girl had no appetite, but her brother urged her to eat because she was still growing and she needed it. Then some third-year Nick, who showed a very open interest in Olivia, sat down at the table. The girl noticed that this guy had broken glasses, so she asked him to take them off, so he wouldn't hurt himself. Had to wear them for a reason. Under them was something interesting that scares people. Namely, eyes that glow in the dark. Olivia was fascinated. She thought it was very beautiful and unusual. When this boy's mom was 3 months pregnant, she wanted to absorb the crystal, but she failed. But the particles got into a new life that was born in the belly. And eventually the boy was born a true warrior, his body stronger than ordinary people's. In class, the teacher told him that such things were strictly forbidden and could lead to very dire consequences. Absorbing crystals during pregnancy was strictly forbidden. By the way, since Harry is now a member of the disciplinary committee, he is required to be on patrol at lunchtime. In general, the academy is a decent place. There are practically no fights here, but in the Union lately, there have been some problems. But in case of trouble, the guy promised to help. By the way, his name is Villa. Olivia really wanted to go on patrol with her brother, but he wouldn't take her because you can't skip class. When Harry went out for his shift, he was looked at by all the girls passing by. They thought he was very attractive and handsome. Thanks to his super perception, the guy sensed that someone was following him. Why not find somewhere private to fight? Right in the middle of the street, the guy turns around and says 3 o'clock, behind a pole, 15 meters from here, preferably not late. The gang of these juvenile delinquents tell Harry to take off his clothes, get on his knees and bark, then maybe they'll let him go. Such an impudent offer only made the guy laugh, because he knew what would happen to these guys next. He slowly and confidently approached them closer and closer, until one of them lost his nerve and attacked. It was the most primitive, rash emotional attack. If a man sells out to his emotions, he's already lost. Gorik also activated his abilities, survived the perfect moment, and delivered the strongest blow with his fist to his face. Now it would be too late to ask for mercy. The guy was beating him in the air as hard as he could and as hard as he wanted. In the end, the weak-minded upstart fell to the ground and couldn't even move properly. Today he got for everyone he offended. His friends, who were unfortunately unharmed, could not believe what had happened. Only a few had managed to resist this student before. Who is this Harry? The boys quickly got up, grabbed their friend and ran off in an unknown direction. Well, at least they didn't leave him behind, which is good. On the way they met Olivia, who apparently hated the guy. She stopped the three of them and ordered them to give her the phone. First she asked nicely, and then she showed me what would happen if I refused her request. It didn't take long for the guys to give her the phone. And now it's time for a photo shoot. Now the guys will place this fight lover in various poses, and Olivia will successfully capture it, and then send to all friends and relatives to admire this beauty too. Having made a large number of compromises, the girl with the song left in an unknown direction. The next day, the boy came to the president in tears and complained about Harry's cruelty, in addition to the fact that he was beaten, and the photos were put on the network. Charlie asked for more details about what Harry was doing to his opponent. The upstart used his trademark move as usual, but Harry not only didn't get hurt, he nailed the guy to the earth. That means the waves didn't affect Harry, so he must have successfully absorbed the fearlessness. The annoying thing is that the guy fought completely unarmed and managed to do it all. With the upstart still alive, Charlie made the decision to just walk away. But how's this poor warrior supposed to move on? He's enemies with Harry. No one really cares about him. Just sit at home for a couple months, and then he can come back. That same evening Charlie came to visit Harry. He showed him the official ranking of fighting power, which is only for young people under 28 years old. On the 68th place was a man named Min. In fact, it was Harry, just so the teachers decided to hide the identity of the guy. But why not just leave the real name? What's the problem? And why do you need a ranking? That question just pissed Charlie off. The thing is that this guy is just a storehouse of talent. He can be written in different ways, like God of War, or a real king and so on. Every coach would want such a student. Also, if a person is on the list for a long time in one place, there may be questions from the organizers. Also, Charlie finally brought weapons that can be used freely. There were a large number of small-edged weapons, and of course a personal sword. Apparently Harry was in a bad mood, because he asked his teacher to leave his weapon and leave. He didn't like that answer, of course, because they had to go to the training ground. In the end, Harry just beat up his teacher, thus showing that he was already good with cold weapons, and he didn't need to practice every day at all. But even though Charlie was already beaten up, he wouldn't shut up, and he kept saying something. The guy's patience was wearing thin, and he just kicked his teacher out the door. He's really quite meticulous. He even made the blades for the kid himself. In this place, sometimes groups of shooters train. You can try to practice with knives with skeet. The guy started the simulator and was getting ready to start the training. You need to step back 20 meters. The first round will start after 3 beeps.